It was a Tuesday. Just a regular, dull, unremarkable Tuesday. If you ask me now why I didn't call Caitlin ahead of time, I couldn't give you a clear reason. I'd wrapped up my meetings in Dallas a day earlier than expected. My flight landed at 3:40 p.m. and instead of heading to a hotel for the night or catching up on work, I found myself driving straight home. Maybe I wanted to surprise her. Maybe I just missed her. Or maybe somewhere deep down I already knew. I didn't text. I didn't call. I wanted to see her face when she opened the door and saw me standing there with my carry-on in one hand and a stupid grin on my face. She hated surprises, but I loved giving them. That's kind of who we were, or at least who I thought we were. The first strange thing happened the moment I stepped into the house. It was too quiet. Not unusual in a technical sense, no music, no TV, no clattering dishes, but emotionally quiet. Like the place had exhaled and forgotten to breathe in again. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you've ever walked into a space right after something you weren't meant to witness happened, you feel it. The shift in energy. Her car wasn't in the driveway, so I figured she was out running errands. That was fine. I dropped my bag, freshen up, maybe surprise her with dinner. Normal husband stuff. I set my keys down, took off my shoes, and headed upstairs. The bedroom door was halfway open and the lights were off. But the curtains had been pulled back and sunlight streamed across the floor. That's when I saw it. There was a bottle of perfume on Caitlin's dresser. Not the kind she usually wears, she's a Chanel No. 5 girl all the way. This was taller, slimmer, with a silver cap and dark rose-tinted glass. It looked expensive and totally unfamiliar. The bottle had been left uncapped, the fragrance already lingering in the air. I reached for it mostly out of habit and took a quick whiff. It was floral and musky, bold, not something Caitlin had ever worn in the 10 years I'd known her. And then I noticed the shirt. On the floor, just beside the dresser, partially under the bed, was a button-down shirt. Navy blue with faint white pinstripes. I bent down and picked it up. It was wrinkled like it had been taken off in a hurry. I checked the tag, size large, not mine. The collar had a faint scent. Not her perfume, something more masculine. I stood there holding it, still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe a friend had stayed over. Maybe she had laundry for someone else. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. But then I walked down into the kitchen and the story started to fall apart in my hands. 2 wine glasses sat on the table. One was clean and drying upside down in the rack. The other was half full with a dark red wine, not the rose Caitlin usually drinks, and a clear lipstick mark sat just above the rim. The same wine bottle was open on the counter. It was a Malbec, one of the expensive ones from the cellar downstairs, the kind we usually reserved for anniversaries or dinner parties. She had been drinking. With someone. Someone who didn't rinse their glass. I looked around the kitchen slowly. One of the bar stools had been pulled slightly out and there were 2 folded cloth napkins next to the sink. Again, maybe innocent. But it didn't feel innocent. It felt lived in. And rushed. I sat down on the couch in the living room and stared at nothing in particular. My mind started replaying the last few weeks, trying to plug in new information to old conversations. She'd been distant lately. Not cold, not exactly, but just far enough away that I could feel the space growing between us. I chalked it up to work. Stress. The usual marriage stuff. I didn't push. I'd always prided myself on being the kind of husband who didn't hover. Who trusted. Who gave space. Now that space felt like a void. She walked in around 5:30. The front door opened fast, keys jingling, heels tapping across the floor. I sat up, heart pounding even though I told myself I'd play it cool. She walked in wearing a dark green dress I'd never seen before, elegant, low back, subtle sparkle. Not the kind of thing you throw on for a Target run. Her makeup was done, lips glossy with that same wine red tint. And the perfume. It hit me again as soon as she walked into the room, same scent as the bottle on the dresser. She carried it like it was part of her now. She froze for half a second when she saw me. Tyler? What are you doing here? Got back early, I said, forcing a smile. Wanted to surprise you. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, but she played it off. Ah, that's sweet. I wish I'd known. I would have picked up something for dinner. Don't worry about it. I stood, motioning toward the wine glasses. You already had company? She blinked, that microsecond of panic. Then her face reset. Oh yeah. Sarah came over earlier. We had wine and caught up. She just left before you got here. I nodded slowly. Right? Sarah. So, the shirt upstairs? Her brow furrowed like she was trying to remember a story she'd memorized a long time ago. Oh, that. Yeah, her husband's, I think. She brought it over because I borrowed one of their lawn chairs last week and she wanted to exchange stuff. I meant to call you about it. The perfume. She laughed a little too loud. She brought that too. Said I should try it, she's obsessed with it lately. I just sprayed a little before she left. You like it? I didn't answer. I looked at her face, calm, smooth, like glass over a storm. None of it felt right. The problem wasn't the inconsistencies in her story, it was the confidence. Like she'd already rehearsed this. Like she knew I might ask. I nodded again, not because I believed her, but because I didn't know what else to do. She leaned in, kissed my cheek again, and said, I'm going to change, this dress is tight. I watched her walk up the stairs, her heels clicking on each step like a metronome for the lie she just told. I didn't follow. I just sat back down and stared at the wine glass. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the knot in my chest wasn't going away. It was growing. Shifting. Turning something inside me that used to feel warm into something else, something suspicious. That night, I lay in bed beside her, pretending to be asleep while she scrolled through her phone, screen tilted away from me. She didn't notice the way I watched her breathing change when a text came in. She didn't notice that I'd seen the second SIM card when her case popped open a few days ago. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront her. But from that moment on, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. And I knew, even if I couldn't prove it yet, that something was already broken. And maybe it had been for a while. After that Tuesday, I stopped sleeping properly. I'd lie beside Caitlin and count the breaths between her messages, listening to the soft taps of her thumbs on the screen as if they could give away the words. She'd always been private with her phone, I respected that. But lately, it wasn't just private. It was sacred. Her lock screen changed weekly. She took it with her into the shower. She charged it by her side of the bed instead of the dock in the hallway. Small things, but they added up like static behind a radio signal you can't quite tune out. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just observed. I smiled when she smiled. I said I love you when she did and waited to hear if she'd say it back with the same weight or just out of habit. That week, she told me she had a girls' night out. Said she needed it, that it had been too long since she'd spent time with her friends. I offered to pick her up afterward. She laughed it off, told me not to worry. It'll probably be a late one, she said, reaching for her earrings. She wore a backless top, tight jeans, and heels I hadn't seen in months, clothes that used to come out on our date nights, back when we had those. As she spritzed on perfume, I watched from the bedroom doorway, thinking back to the bottle on her dresser. Same scent. Who's going? I asked. She paused, applying lipstick. Just the usual crew. Sarah, Hannah, maybe Lee. I nodded. But here's the thing, I talked to Sarah the week before when I ran into her at a grocery store. She and her husband had just welcomed their second baby. She didn't exactly strike me as the late night out type anymore. Still, I said nothing. That night, I waited. Around midnight, I got a text. Still out. Might crash at Sarah's. Don't wait up. Love you, love? The heart emoji sealed it. Caitlin never used emojis with me. She thought they were tacky. I sat there with that message open for 10 minutes before I finally locked my phone. Then I lay back on the couch and stared at the ceiling, trying to decide whether I was being paranoid or whether I'd simply ignored the truth for too long. The next morning, she walked in around 9 a.m. wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a to-go coffee. She looked tired, like someone who'd slept a total of 45 minutes on a couch that wasn't hers. Rough night? I asked casually. Ugh, you have no idea, she groaned, dropping her bag. I need a shower and like 10 Advil. She didn't elaborate and I didn't press. But something inside me, something primitive, began to coil tighter and tighter like a spring waiting to snap. Later that week, I was at work when it happened. The second clue. One of those blink and you'll miss it things that stays with you forever once you see it. I work in the strategy department at a logistics firm and I just finished presenting a proposal for a software integration that could have cut operational costs by 12%. I was proud of it, clean, efficient, easy to scale. The board had been skeptical, but I had allies. Or I thought I did. Then Noah opened his mouth. Noah is one of those guys you either tolerate or completely avoid. Senior executive, young for his position, wears expensive suits like they're gym clothes. We'd always been cordial, even collaborative at times, but that day he dismantled my proposal in front of everyone. Not professionally, personally. Ambitious, but unrealistic, he said with a slight smirk. Too dependent on theoretical scaling. We've already looked into these models last year. They don't work in practice. They hadn't. Because they hadn't been mine. I clenched my jaw but stayed composed. When the meeting ended, I went back to my desk and pulled up last year's files. As I thought, the framework Noah claimed we already looked into didn't exist before now. He was lying. Or worse, he'd gotten access to my prototype through someone else. But what struck me most was something subtle. During the meeting, when Noah rejected my plan, he'd made an offhand joke. You should run this stuff by Caitlin first, she's sharper than you give her credit for. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But it stuck with me. How did he know my wife? Caitlin didn't work in logistics. She wasn't in tech. She was a consultant for a boutique marketing firm that did lifestyle branding, not corporate operations. That night, I asked her straight out. Do you know Noah? She barely looked up from her tablet. Noah who? Noah Graves. From my company. She paused. Too long. Then shrugged. I mean, I've met him, maybe? At one of your parties. We hadn't hosted a company party in over a year. Are you sure? I asked. She nodded. Yeah. Why? Just curious. He mentioned you today in a meeting. Again, she shrugged. Weird. I barely know him. She turned back to her tablet and that was it. No follow-up. No questions. And that's when the timeline started to rearrange itself in my head, all the skipped dinners, the last-minute meetings, the new dresses, the perfume, the second SIM card I'd spotted that she never mentioned. I remembered the Sunday she said she had a retreat out of town with her firm. I'd offered to drive her to the airport, she insisted on an Uber. I watched her leave with just a weekend tote and a garment bag. No laptop. No materials. The following night, I had tried calling her. No answer. Then a text. Sorry, spotty signal. Workshop all day tomorrow. I'll call in the morning. Love you. It felt robotic. Sanitized. Then there was the time I found a set of receipts folded inside her wallet. She'd left it in the bathroom by mistake. They were from a rooftop bar downtown, dated during one of her so-called client dinners. The name on the check-in reservation? N. Graves. Still, I didn't confront her. I wanted more than suspicion. I needed truth. I started pulling back. I stopped initiating conversation. Stopped suggesting date nights. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Weeks passed. And every new moment of distance started to stitch together a pattern. She wasn't pulling away because of work or stress. She was pulling away because she'd already left emotionally, if not physically. The tipping point came when I went back through some company emails. We'd had a security audit recently and I'd been given access to metadata while investigating a phishing attempt. It wasn't illegal, but it felt personal. One file stuck out, a download log from an internal document I'd created accessible only to senior staff. Somehow Caitlin's work IP address had accessed it. Not through her email. Through Noah's. I sat in my office, staring at that line of data for what felt like hours. That night, I drove home and walked straight to the bathroom. Caitlin was in the shower. I picked up her phone off the counter. It was locked. Of course. But on the mirror, drawn faintly in the steam, was a message. You looked amazing last night. I waited outside the bathroom. She came out wrapped in a towel, smiling. Hey, she said, you're home early. I nodded. Just felt like it. She kissed me on the cheek, then slipped into the bedroom. I watched the fog fade from the mirror until the message disappeared. That night, I didn't sleep. Again. But it was different. I wasn't anxious. I was awake fully. And I knew something Caitlin didn't. I wasn't going to wait around anymore. It was raining the day I found out for sure. Not some cinematic storm, just one of those light, steady drizzles that soaks into everything and makes you feel heavier for walking through it. I'd left the office early after a client meeting got canceled last minute. I didn't even think twice about heading home. I just wanted a quiet afternoon. Maybe coffee. Maybe answers. The streets were already slick when I turned into our neighborhood, the windshield wipers ticking a steady rhythm. A car I didn't recognize was parked across the street from our driveway. A black Lexus sedan, newer model, with dealer plates still attached. I slowed down as I passed it. I'd seen it before. Not often, but enough that it stirred something uneasy in me. I parked in front of the house. No lights on downstairs. No sounds. The air felt still again. Like it had that day I found the perfume. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me gently, listening. Nothing. Her purse wasn't on the hook. Her shoes weren't by the mat. But I knew she was home. I could feel it. Like the room held the tension of a conversation I hadn't been invited to. I walked upstairs quietly. The hallway carpet absorbed my footsteps. When I reached the bedroom, I noticed the door wasn't fully closed. It was cracked. Just enough. I heard a laugh. Soft. Familiar. Not Caitlin's. Then her voice. Low. Int**mate. That whispery tone she used to save for me, back when she cared about what I thought of her laugh. I didn't push the door open. I didn't burst in. I stood there, just listening, the way someone might listen for a pulse that isn't there anymore. Another laugh, this one clearly his. I moved my head just enough to peer through the gap. There they were. Caitlin, sitting on the bed, her legs tucked under her, wearing one of my old t-shirts, the gray one with the faded baseball logo. Noah was beside her, leaning back on his hands, legs crossed at the ankle. They weren't doing anything incriminating by definition, no kissing, no touching, but they didn't have to. The way she looked at him, the way he looked back, it was enough. The casual and asterisk Macy, the easy familiarity, the kind of comfort that doesn't exist between people who are still pretending. They were talking about something mundane, a vacation property, I think. Maybe a trip they were planning. Maybe one they'd already taken. But the words didn't matter. I saw everything I needed to see in the space between them. I backed away. I didn't make a sound. I walked back down the stairs and out the front door like a man on autopilot. Got into my car. Sat there with the rain drumming on the roof like a ticking clock. I wasn't angry. Not in that moment. There was no shouting, no slamming of doors, no impulsive rage. Just the kind of quiet that comes after a long, slow fall. The part where your body hasn't hit the ground yet, but your stomach already knows it's coming. I stared out the windshield at the Lexus across the street. It was his. Of course it was. I must have seen it in the company parking lot, or maybe one of the leadership retreats. It was all right there in front of me. And somehow, I'd missed it, or refused to see it. The second SIM card. The shift in her tone. The blocked proposal. The offhand jokes. The dinner receipts. The locked phone. The lie about Sarah. The perfume. And now this. They didn't even notice I'd been there. I drove away. I didn't even know where I was going at first. I just kept the wheels moving. Took side streets. Drove past old memories. Past the park where she and I used to walk on Sundays. Past the cafe where we had our first real argument and made up over burnt lattes. Past the hotel downtown where she once surprised me on my birthday with a weekend stay. Every place felt like a souvenir from a vacation we never actually took. Eventually, I pulled into a gas station lot and parked at the far end. Shut the engine off. I sat there for a long time. The longer I sat, the clearer things became. Not just about her, about him. Noah hadn't just inserted himself into my personal life. He'd been orchestrating parts of it behind the scenes. There was no way he'd gotten access to my strategic framework without help. No way he had that level of insight unless someone close to me had handed it over. Caitlin had always asked questions, innocently, casually. How's the software project going? Are you still meeting with that client in Phoenix? Do you think your proposal will pass? At the time, I thought she was being supportive, engaged, curious. Now I knew better. She was gathering intel and feeding it to the one person in my company with both the power to destroy my reputation and the motive to benefit from it. And if that was true, if Caitlin had been actively helping him, then this wasn't just infidelity. It was strategic, calculated, a betrayal on two fronts, work and home, professional and personal. Everything I had built, my marriage, my career, had become tools for them to play with. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even curse. I just stared down at the steering wheel and wondered when I had stopped seeing clearly. At what point did I go blind to the woman who was supposed to love me? And what did it say about me that even now, a part of me still wanted her to have an excuse? I didn't go back to the house that night. I booked a hotel room near the airport. Told the front desk I needed 2 nights, maybe more. The clerk asked if I was traveling for business or pleasure. I just smiled and said neither. That night, I lay on the stiff mattress staring at the popcorn ceiling, listening to planes take off overhead. I thought about calling someone, my brother, maybe, but I didn't want to hear that tone in anyone's voice. That mix of sympathy and disbelief. I wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank document. And I started writing. Not to her. Not to him. To myself. A list of everything I now knew. Every dot I could connect. Every moment I'd overlooked. The shirt. The glass. The wine. The missing evenings. The second SIM card. Noah's comment. The project sabotage. The mirror message. The way she laughed in a room I didn't belong in. By the time I stopped typing, it was past 3 a.m. And when I finally closed the lid, I knew what I had to do. The only thing worse than being lied to is letting the lie stay standing. The email came 2 days later. I was back at the house, technically still mine, even if it no longer felt like it. Caitlin hadn't said much after that afternoon. When I returned, the bedroom was spotless. Her makeup was tucked away. The sheets smelled like lavender, not like someone else's cologne. If she noticed I was gone overnight, she didn't mention it. We just coexisted. Quietly. Politely. Like two people waiting for a storm that already passed through and ruined everything without either of us bothering to board the windows. I opened my laptop at the kitchen counter. A notification popped up from the company's legal department. Subject line, urgent, immediate account review. I clicked. Tyler. Effective immediately, your access to company systems has been temporarily suspended pending an internal review. This is in regard to activity flagged as inconsistent with company data policy. A full report will be provided upon request. Please refrain from accessing proprietary information during this review process. Compliance Division. I stared at the screen, blinking. Inconsistent activity? My stomach dropped. This wasn't a review. This was a setup. I tried to log into my work profile. Access denied. I called my direct manager, voicemail. I messaged IT, bounce back. By noon, I couldn't reach anyone above my pay grade. Except one person, Noah. He called me around 3 p.m. acting surprised. Hey, Tyler. Just heard about your account lock. *CKs, man. But you know how these things go, legal has to take this stuff seriously. I didn't respond. Probably just a misunderstanding, he continued, tone smooth as ever. They flagged something from your end related to proprietary modeling data. Honestly? Might be that new CRM patch you were working on. He knew. He knew exactly what it was. Because he was the one who accessed it. Or, more likely, Caitlin did and passed it along. You're the one who flagged me, weren't you? I said finally. A pause. Then laughter. Quiet, almost condescending. Don't take this personally, Ty. It's just business. I hung up. That night, Caitlin was already upstairs when I got home. The Lexus was gone. She hadn't asked where I'd been. I hadn't told her I'd been sitting in my car outside the corporate office for 2 hours, trying to figure out whether to walk in and demand answers or walk away and let it burn behind me. I walked into the kitchen and found 2 documents waiting on the table. One was a typed letter with my name at the top. No salutation. Tyler. This isn't easy. I didn't plan for things to happen this way. I'll be staying in Chicago for a while with my father. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Caitlin. The second was handwritten. Sloppia. A sticky note taped to the envelope. Your things are by the front door. I opened the closet. 3 boxes. One with my name in Sharpie on the side. The others unmarked. They had packed my life into cardboard. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch surrounded by the hollow echo of everything I used to trust. The next morning I was called into the boardroom. I wore a suit. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself I was still the same man they'd hired years ago, the guy who built their flagship logistics program, the one who stayed late and showed up early, who didn't take shortcuts. I walked into the conference room and saw them all waiting. Legal. HR, Noah. And Donald. Donald, Caitlin's father. Founder. Executive chairman. My father-in-law. Technically still family for now. He didn't smile when I entered. Didn't blink. Just leaned forward, folded his hands, and said, Tyler, we're terminating your employment effective immediately. That was it. No explanation. No back and forth. Just a single line like a judge delivering a sentence. The legal rep slid a folder across the table. Inside was a report filled with carefully crafted nonsense, data inconsistencies, unauthorized usage, conflict of interest. Everything designed to make me look like a liability, like someone who'd blurred the lines between home and office. And they were right, just not in the way they thought. I stood, nodded once, and left. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't need to, because I already knew this was never about the software. It was about leverage. About erasing me from both their lives without giving me time to react. I drove straight home, if you could even still call it that. When I arrived, the garage code didn't work. I tried twice. Then again. Nothing. I parked on the street and used my key at the front door. It still opened. For now. Inside, the house looked untouched. But something about the air was final. My toothbrush was gone. My drawers were empty. A pile of mail sat on the counter, all addressed to Caitlin or the foundation. Not me. I opened the letter from the foundation, a small trust Donald managed for real estate holdings. It confirmed what I suspected. Effective immediately, all residential rights to the property at 1824 Maple Lane revert to the holding company. Non-resident occupancy is prohibited past June 1st. My name wasn't on the deed. Never had been. The house wasn't mine. The job wasn't mine. And the marriage? That had ended the day I saw Caitlin lean into Noah's shoulder with a laugh that used to be mine. In the span of a week, I'd lost everything they could take. My title. My office. My income. My home. My wife. I packed my things into the back of my car, what little I had left. The boxes she'd stacked by the door were filled with clothes, cables, and a couple framed photos I didn't ask for. She hadn't even taken the time to remove the picture of us from Hawaii, the one I now realized must have been a lie even back then. As I shut the trunk, I looked up at the house one last time. I didn't feel rage. Or even sadness. Just a strange, hollow clarity. They had spent weeks, maybe months, planning this. Setting traps, aligning narratives, cutting me out with clean precision. But they made one mistake. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They thought I'd crumble. Instead, I rented a studio on the edge of town. Small. Bare. Quiet. Just me, a mattress, a coffee maker, and a laptop. I called no one. Told no one where I was. I disappeared. And while they celebrated their clean break, I began to rebuild piece by piece from memory. They thought they'd erased me. They were wrong. No one knew where I'd gone. That was the point. The apartment I found was the kind of place no one would expect me to live in, small, unfurnished, tucked behind a used tire shop on the edge of Austin. It was barely 600 square feet. One room. A fold-up table, a camping chair I got from a thrift store, a mattress on the floor. My laptop sat in the center of it all like some sacred relic. There were no framed photos. No clocks. No distractions. Just time and silence. I didn't tell friends. I didn't tell my brother. I changed my number. Deleted social media. Let the world go on thinking I'd disappeared because, in a way, I had. But what Caitlin and Donald and Noah never understood about me was this: silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it's just a recalibration. They thought they'd taken everything. But they'd overlooked the one thing that couldn't be boxed up or revoked or logged out of my mind. My work. My systems. I'd spent years building architecture for their company, supply chain networks, automation strategies, predictive scheduling models. Some of it had never even been deployed. Some of it they buried in committee. I hadn't stolen anything. Let me be clear. I didn't take a single proprietary document. But I didn't need to. Because I remembered every version I'd ever built. Every iteration I'd pitched. Every design they rejected because it didn't serve their politics. And over the next 6 months, I rebuilt it all from scratch, cleaner, smarter, faster. Not bound by old constraints or executive ego. I spent 18 hours a day coding, modeling, testing. Ate cheap takeout, drank gas station coffee, lived like a monk in a digital temple of my own making. I read books on systems thinking, AI-driven routing, real-time fleet management. Took online courses at 2 a.m. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to burn the old framework to the ground and rebuild something they'd never be able to catch up to. And as I worked, I kept notes. Not on what they'd done, but on how they'd done it. How Noah timed his sabotage to coincide with my proposal. How Caitlin extracted intel in the guise of pillow talk. How Donald used legalese to kick me out before I could push back. I wasn't documenting it for revenge. I was documenting it for clarity. So I wouldn't forget how it felt to be methodically erased. So I'd remember later when they came knocking again. One night in early February, I got a message from a guy I'd met at a startup conference 2 years ago. His name was Daniel Wu. Sharp, quiet, relentless in the way I'd once tried to be before life cracked me open. He ran a small investor group focused on smart infrastructure. Said he'd heard from a mutual contact that I'd gone solo. Asked if I'd be open to consulting. I said sure. Told him I had something in progress. Sent him a few sanitized **TS of the platform I'd been building. He called me 30 minutes later. This, he said, is exactly what we've been looking for. 2 weeks later, I was in a co-working space downtown, pitching the beta version of my platform, a lean, AI-driven logistics tool that streamlined scheduling and fleet coordination in a way no legacy system had even come close to. It wasn't pretty yet, but it worked. Daniel brought in 2 other partners. They offered funding, equity, full creative control. No suits, no titles, just results. We called it Haven Systems. By April, we had our first round of client demos. By May, we had contracts. Mostly mid-tier regional haulers at first, the kind of companies Donald's firm used to overlook. They didn't overlook us. They jumped on. Because our platform didn't just work. It made their jobs easier, faster, cheaper. We cut delivery time variance by 22% in the first 60 days. Reduced idle fleet time by 30%. Clients didn't care who I used to be. They cared that I was making them money. By the end of June, Haven Systems had over 30 regional clients. By August, we passed 50. And somewhere in that flurry of growth, someone sent me a link to a local business column. It was a piece about declining performance at Donald's company, loss of high-tier contracts, negative feedback on rollout efficiency. A quote from a former client who'd left just a few weeks earlier. They weren't adapting. The systems felt outdated. We needed something more dynamic. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just saved the article and added it to a folder on my desktop labeled Perspective. The first time someone from my old world reached out was in September. An old colleague, Sam. Good guy. Middle management. Always neutral. He sent a short email. Hey man, heard what happened. Saw what you're doing now. If you ever need someone on the logistics ops side, let me know. Hope you're good. I didn't reply. A week later, another email. This one from a different name. Donald's executive assistant. She asked if I'd be willing to schedule a call to explore potential opportunities for collaboration or strategic repair. Strategic repair. What a phrase. I archived it without responding. More followed. A message from HR saying they were reevaluating previous account decisions. A text from Caitlin's cousin, the one who always smiled too big at family dinners, saying she always thought you deserved better. Then came Caitlin's message. Not a text. A letter. Real paper. Sent to my co-working address. How she got it, I don't know. Maybe Sam talked. Maybe someone else pieced it together. The envelope was handwritten. Neat cursive. I sat with it for 2 days before opening it. Inside, Tyler, I've thought about writing this for a long time. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I was wrong. Not just about what I did. About who I was. You didn't deserve what happened. None of it. I hope you're okay. I hope you're happy. I hope you're building something incredible. Because you always could. See. No excuses. No explanations. Just words. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of the perspective folder. Not out of spite, out of respect. Not for her. For me. Because now I understood something I hadn't before. Closure doesn't come from the people who broke you. It comes from the person who decides not to stay broken. So I kept building. Haven Systems expanded into freight brokerage. Then data licensing. We brought in real-time route optimization powered by live traffic sensors and predictive weather algorithms. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. Better than anything I'd ever been allowed to build under someone else's name. By the end of the year, we were in 4 states. Donald's firm pulled out of 2 of them. I never mentioned it. Never responded to the letters. Never took the bait. Instead, I kept a note on my wall, scribbled in black Sharpie. You are not what they took from you. And every morning when I woke up, made coffee and logged in, I believed it a little more. They had erased me once, but I'd written myself back in line by line, code by code. Not out of revenge. Out of principle. Out of clarity. Out of peace. And peace, I was learning, is the most dangerous thing a betrayed man can possess. Months after Haven Systems became a regional force, the silence broke. First came the LinkedIn requests from ex-colleagues. Then a short email from Donald himself, let's talk. The industry needs your leadership. I didn't reply. He tried to erase me. Now he needed my vision. Not long after, Caitlin sent a letter. Apologies. Regret. Talk of therapy. She said she'd been lost and didn't recognize who she'd become. I didn't hate her. I just didn't care anymore. I archived the messages like receipts, not to reopen wounds, but to remember what they cost me to heal. Today, I live between Austin, Munich, and Tokyo. I no longer chase validation. My work speaks for itself. There are no deadlines looming, no corporate hands on my shoulders. Just clarity. Autonomy. Peace. The man once sidelined in a boardroom is now the one reshaping the industry. They reach out hoping for rescue. I give them silence, not out of vengeance, but because I finally understand sometimes the most powerful answer isn't a roar. It's not answering at all.